quick sound check for those of you who have joined us. If you would, do me a favor, please, and just use your attendee panel to raise your hand so I can confirm that you can hear me okay. Excellent, thanks. Throughout the broadcast, you will be in listen-only mode, but you can definitely use the question panel within your attendee panel to write down any questions you have, and I'll try to address them at the end. All right, well, it looks like we've hit the time mark here. It is 10 o'clock in the evening where I'm calling from tonight, and I know it's in the morning, I think, or the afternoon where many of you are joining us today, so let's get started. Today's webcast is Ideate Sticky for Revit, and we're going to spend about a half hour giving you an overview of this new tool published by Ideate Software. My name is Glennis Patterson, and I'm a licensed architect in the United States. I've worked as an architect and also in construction management, but my current role is in software development. Today, as I mentioned, we're going to be taking a look at a product called Ideate Sticky. But before we do that, I wanted to just review how Revit manages different kinds of data in the Revit project. So as many of you understand, of course, Revit is really good at managing the BIM data, and that can be things as different as the schedule, the column schedule, and of course the building itself. All that information is being synchronized very well by Revit. But there are lots of different kinds of non-BIM data that really aren't well managed. And examples of that data are things like code checklists. We have design data, for example. It could be this raw fixture count example for plumbing. We have lots of consultant data sometimes that isn't necessarily correlate to building information modeling, but nonetheless needs to be part of our projects. And then, of course, there's things like general notes that reference items in the plan but aren't directly correlating. And then there's also kinds of data that, while it might be BIM data, is not supported within the Revit environment because of the way it needs to be represented. So for example, a document issue record, which is typically represented in a matrix style data, that's a kind of information that's difficult to represent inside the Revit model. Now, to solve these kinds of sort of non-BIM data representations, we all have a lot of different kinds of workarounds. There's the method by which you'll take a screenshot, for example. And of course, this often results in some pretty unprofessional looking working drawings. And then also because images aren't linked, it's a process that would need to be manually updated should there be any kind of change. So it's a very time-consuming method to try to solve this problem. Other methods include linking a DWG or linking a DXF. And this process, of course, requires maintenance inside a AutoCAD environment, which can be time-consuming in itself. And then again, the visual quality is typically inferior due to font mapping and so forth. So that's often also very unsatisfactory. Other methods include using key schedules to represent sort of tabular data, and this is something that does work, but it can be very limited in the formatting because it's restricted to the Revit schedule itself. And then also, I think there's a certain amount of concern about the irregular usage of the Revit database. So we know, for example, we have a lot of customers who might use a key schedule and pick some arbitrary data category like topography to represent something as a placeholder that has nothing to do with topography, for example. So that may also be very unsatisfactory as a solution for addressing these sort of non-BIM types of information. Lastly, we have customers that are trying to represent this table data by using lines and text. And as many of you have probably discovered, lines and text, and lots of them, is actually something that can that does impact performance. And handling word wrap continues to be a challenge for many of us, definitely something that can be frustrating to me. And then lastly, putting that information on a drafting view doesn't always address the problem very well, because of course drafting views don't support duplication. So if you need to represent it in more than one place in your project, that's not going to be a very good solution. So what Ideate Sticky is all about is trying to manage those other kinds of non-BIM data in a way that is lightweight and easy to use. So we're going to be spending next half hour showing you how to use Ideate Sticky and talking about different examples where it might be very productive in your own work environment. We'll start by just walking you through this very common example of a non-BIM data. Here what we're looking at is a code checklist, and this kind of checklist is something that maybe is being required by your building code official to be part of your documentation set. So what we do for Sticky is in an Excel file we set up our page print area, and then in the Revit side we'll launch Sticky, which can be found from the Add-ins tab, and we'll use the Create button here to essentially link this Excel file into our projects. We're going to be looking at some sample files here. These are ones that ship with the product, so you could try this. If you download a trial version, you'll see these exact same Excel files, and we've provided a variety to represent different kinds of non-BIM data that you might be needing to put into your own projects. So for this code checklist, we'll use the Create button to add this, and then we'll check the auto update functionality. And you can see this is what the Sticky looks like in your project. Let's take a look at the Excel file that it was generated from. We'll open this here. And so the benefit here is I can be working along in my Excel file filling out these fields. Maybe I don't even know Revit, but I'm going to be able to fill out this information. And then when this file is updated, we have the ability to have that information be automatically pulled back into our project. And when we open our project again, Sticky, as you can see there, is doing a check to look for the new information. And you can see here that those fields have been filled out. So the idea here is a pretty simple one. It's like linking a DWG into your project, except this time we're just linking an Excel file into your project. Okay, so what is a Sticky? This is always the first question we get asked. And again, I would encourage you, for those of you who have joined, you are in listen-only mode, but feel free to add questions to the panel and I'll try to address them during or after the presentation. So the first question is often, what is a Sticky? What a Sticky is a schedule. Specifically, it is a schedule header. And for those of you who maybe aren't familiar, this is some new relatively new functionality in the Revit model that you can actually edit and provide formatting to the Revit schedule header object itself. And you're seeing here on my screen where some of those tools, including shading, borders, fonts, and alignment. So there's a lot of things that you can do with the schedule header that you're not able to do with a regular schedule. So that's what a Sticky is, and you'll see it as I'm showing on my screen here. You'll see it listed under your schedule area within the project browser. And this is a really important feature, that it is a native Revit element. We're not making anything custom in terms of a Revit element. It's just a schedule header, and we're populating it with information that came from that Excel file. Let me just check real quick and make sure there's no questions. Okay, great. All right, so let's move on and talk about the different things that you might want to use Ideate Sticky with. Some of the real common examples for sort of the everyday Revit user would be simple things like general notes and conditions. The benefit of doing it in Excel might be formatting. It might also be the idea that you could do it in one place and populate that information up to many different Revit projects. You might also be using it to coordinate information from consultants. consultants that maybe aren't using Revit and they're delivering information to you in Excel. You can just sticky that information right into your project. Code checklists, as we just saw, is a very popular use of Ideate Sticky, as is owner requirements, including them on your documents. Other examples for BIM managers are things like publishing your starting views or tips of the day. Again, because we're linking a file and because that file, the contents of that Excel file can be automatically updated in your Revit projects, you can take a single Excel file, make changes to it, and have it trickle through your any project where it's been linked in. So for BIM managers, those are some of the usages. And then also things like document issue records. A very important document tracking, which sheets have been issued on which day and with which revision numbers. That often is an important part of the documentation set, and that's something the BIM manager might want to be representing in a matrix style, which again isn't supported within Revit itself. And then as far as other users and other kinds of uses of Ideate Sticky, it really depends on what your area of expertise is. Here's just a couple examples based on different disciplines. We had a lot of great feedback during our beta testing from a variety of different types of Revit users, structural, mechanical, and architectural users. And definitely on the structural side, what we're seeing a lot of is all, these kind of code requirements, again, that need to be in there, as well as content that's coming from the manufacturer about requirements. Okay, so lots of different kinds of usages depending upon your particular profession. We have, as I said, lots of manufacturer content. There's design criteria content that needs to be published. Then, of course, code requirements that are going to be unique to your particular discipline. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the sample content that's provided with Sticky. I'm showing on my screen here an example from the online help. You might find that something useful if you want to look through it, but you can see here there's a topic that relates to the sample files, and there's sort of an explanation of them in the help file, so you can look at that later if you'd like to. But I'm going to just go over to Revit now and walk you through a couple of these examples, and again, field questions, feel free to add them to the question panel there. Ideate Sticky does launch and install to the add-ins tab here, so go ahead and pick it here. When you first start using Ideate Sticky, it will be blank like this. And it does need to be on a sheet, which is good. My focus was over here a second ago. So to place a sticky, you do need to be on a sheet. Go ahead and do that again. And then you'll be asked to select an Excel file. Out of the box, you are going to be initially directed to this sample folder. So what I'm showing you right now is identical to what you would be able to try out when you take a look at the trial version of our software. The trial version, by the way, is full functioning, so you'll be able to do everything that I'm doing here. And we'll start by just using this first one, which is called abbreviations. Each of these examples was provided to us by customers, and you can see here after you select the file, there will be an option to select the worksheet. In this case, this file has only one worksheet. And you can also change the name here. By default, it's going to preface it with the word sticky. You can alter that if you'd like. And then once you say OK, you'll sort of see that information. Again, very much like the Link DWG dialog box. You can choose to use the auto update or not. Here, by default, it's turned off. And then when we close, we can see the results of this sticky, and I'll go ahead and zoom in and show you what this is. So in this case, it's just an Excel file that holds our standard abbreviations that we'd like to have on our cover sheet. And the benefit of doing it in this way, again, is that I could easily update that if there's any changes, either by auto updating or manually updating. If I want to just manually update it, I can always just come here and select the update button to force it to update, or I can actually point it to a completely different version of that file by using my Update From button. All right, so let me go ahead and move this. It is going, when you create the sticky, it's going to place it in the middle of your sheet, so you can go ahead and move it around after the fact. And let's take a look at our schedule dialog here on the right-hand side. Sticky. We'll go ahead and look at another sample. What am I doing here? Sorry, there's a message popping up here. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. I'm getting an indicator that there's a performance issue. But I'll assume I'm doing okay unless I hear any questions or chat. All right, we're going to look at another sticky now. We already looked at the code example, so let's go ahead and take a look at this. Let's try this concrete strength table. Again, this is a very sort of typical type of usage of sticky, where we've got criteria. Maybe this is from the building officials. I'll go ahead and move this over here and take a look at it. And so really the formatting that is available to you is a function of, what do you know how to do in Excel? Can you graphically represent it in this way? And does the Revit schedule header itself support that? And we can get into, if anybody has any questions about specific examples about formatting, there generally are some. I'd be happy to answer them. So let's go ahead and take a look at another example that'll show some different formatting options. Let's see. We looked at, let's take a look at some of these starting views. Again, if for a BIM manager, I think the idea that you might want to publish to all of your projects some information, or maybe all the Revit files within a specific Revit project, some starting view information. And this could change over time. But again, you could be just updating that without even opening the Revit project. Okay. So for the abbreviation example, that's probably not going to change very often. There's no real need to make that an auto update sticky. But certainly for an example like the starting view, we would want to assign that an auto update function. Now the way that works is when I reopen the file, that's the point in time where it's going to reread that information, which again is just like how the DWG linked functionality works. It's when you open the file that it refreshes the view. Another similar example to the starting view would be the idea of doing a Revit tip of the day. That would be something maybe that every Revit project could have, not just project-specific information. And again, they're going to be sitting on top of each other. I'm just going to go ahead and line them up. So you can see there's our fabulous tip of the day. When in doubt, try a right-click. I'm going to go ahead and use this as an example to demonstrate how the update from functionality works. So I've got my tip of the day. You can see here the Excel file path is listed, and if you hover over it, it'll show you sort of where. So it's pointing to the out-of-the-box file, but I've already made a change in my own directory, and we're going to update from that source. So we'll go ahead and shift here and browse to a different location here, and we're going to look for the Revit tip and open here. And you can see there underneath we've got, if you explode a CAD import, you will be fired immediately. That's the new tip of the day. So very easy to redirect the Excel file that the sticky is referencing. All right, so those are just some of the examples. Let's go through and cover a couple other important concepts related to Ideate Sticky. One of the reasons, frankly, that we initially developed Ideate Sticky is because we were very interested in some data-intensive workflows. And I know that we've been talking about sort of non-BIM data, but the reality is there's actually quite a few BIM-related workflows. And this is just one of them, and I think this idea applies to a lot of different kinds of issues. This is a workflow that relates to taking spatial data, rooms or areas, and doing summary level calculations on that data, and then representing only that summary level data. So specifically, if for those of you who are familiar with this, we're looking at maybe trying to do a plumbing fixture count. And if you're familiar with that type of workflow, it involves using an if-then statement. And if you look at this example, what we can see is that we can let Revit do that if-then statement, right? That's not too hard to do, assuming you know how to write an if-then statement. But you do that math, and Revit will apply that math to each and every room or every area. And so if you let Revit do this math, you'll see here, for example, the number of water closets for the men it's returning is going to be 9, approximately 9 or 10 water closets total, 6 or almost 7 for the first floor and 3 for the second floor. So that's what if Revit were to do that calculation. But the reality is for code compliance, that's probably not really how the code is intended to work. And in fact, you would be much better off, and your customer would probably be a lot happier if you did it the way the code was intended to do. And so in that manner, what you really would want to do is you would want to first summarize all of the occupant counts on a per level basis perhaps, and then, and only then, do the if-then statement on that summary level. And so the difference, of course, between these two pieces of data is pretty significant. Your customer is going to care about this. And this is just, again, this is one example. The idea is that the summary and the subtotaling that's happening in Revit is not always fitting the need that you may have for your project. And so in these kinds of cases, it's very important that we represent the data as it's intended to be represented. So in this type of scenario, what our customers are doing is taking that data outside of Revit, and there's a variety of ways to do that, including we use our own tool called BIMlink that can do that data, but then calculating that value and summarizing it in a table, and then that information can be brought back in via Ideate Sticky. So the big concept here is summarizing data in a way that is in alignment with your code requirements. Okay, any questions about that? Let me just double check my chat panel here. All right, looks like we're good to go. All right, well, we're coming up on the half hour here, so let me just wrap this up and then we can go to any other questions. Again, please feel free to add them to this question panel. But in summary, the benefits of Ideate Sticky are, first of all, as a solution for representing tabular data, this solution is going to give you the highest visual fidelity, meaning what you see is what you get. It's going to look like the Excel file. It's going to represent and print with vector graphics, and you're going to be able to represent the tables in the way you need them. It also, of course, is supporting direct collaboration with Excel users. This can be people who are using Dropbox or other methods of file sharing, and that information can be directly brought into your Revit project. We support network deployment with Ideate Sticky and all of our products. Most of our customers who are using network, we can get them up and running in about 15 minutes. We use FlexLM, so it can just sit alongside your existing Revit server license if that's what you're using. And this is a tool that has been, like all of the Ideate software tools, has been optimized for both performance and quality. Being able to update 40 stickies in a project, and yes, we do have customers that have that many in a project, is really important. So we've done a lot of speed and performance testing on this with the auto update function to make sure it's really going to meet your needs. If you'd like to learn more about Ideate Sticky, we do have pretty extensive help files. They can be found online, and they include a lot of how-to topics, and as I showed you here, some of the sample files that you might want to get started. So before I turn it over to the questions, I just want to mention some of the things that you can do is you can download our trial version. It's available for both Revit 2014 and 2015, but I did want to note that the 2014 version would require that you've done at least one of the service pack updates. The initial shipping version of Revit 2014 would not support the use of Ideate Sticky. There is a Getting Started guide that you can also take a look at that's within the help file. And then if you have questions that relate to purchasing, A2K can certainly follow up and get you any kind of the pricing information, whether you want standalone or whether you're interested in our network solutions. You can ask about that. All right, so let me go ahead, and I did see a couple other questions. Let me go ahead and pull that up here. All right. Looks like I don't have any questions. Oh, here we go. We have one question. And actually, this is a question that we've been asked quite a bit, so I actually did prepare a slide on this one. Let me see if I can find it here real quickly. Not that. We did get the question about can you split it into multiple pages. Of course, Revit Schedule has that nice little split schedule table functionality where you click those little blue Z's and you can divide it into two pieces. Unfortunately, the schedule header itself does not have a split function, so you can't use that as a way to subdivide it, but you can through management of your Excel file represent sort of the information from the first tab can be represented on additional tabs as a way of creating two stickies to represent two pages. So for things like long, revision lists, for example, that's something that we can definitely support. And in fact, if you use the out-of-the-box sample file provided that relates to multi-page revisions, it's set up so that you can see that as an example. Okay, it looks like we have another question here. Okay, another great question. It's from James, thanks. It says, can we import images? I think I just sent our note to our programming staff. That's a great version 2 feature request that we'd like to add. At present, when you have an Excel file with the images, what will happen is it will just skip them. And so what you can do, and we have some customers doing this, you can create the sticky and sort of leave a placeholder for the image and then manually add those images. But unfortunately at the moment it will not automatically bring them in. Great question. Thank you. And okay, let's see, another one. Data links in an Excel file. Let's see. I'm going to have to interpret that question. The question is data links in an Excel file. I'm not exactly sure what the reference is, but I'll guess, and you can tell me if I'm not correct. The way that the information is brought in is it will read the resultant value of a formula. So if a formula is cross-referencing other sheets, whether they're in that same workbook or not, basically if it's in there, by and large, it will be able to represent that information. There are a couple accounting formulas that I don't think most architects and engineers use that we have had some trouble with, but I would just recommend that you give the trial a spin and see if it's going to support the workflow that you need. And if it doesn't, let us know, and we can always look into it and see if there's something else we can do about that. All right, let's see. Oh, if you have a hyperlink to a product. Great question, James. Thanks. Keep them coming. Again, I think the question relates probably back to the image question. If you have a hyperlink in there, what comes across? What's going to come across is just the text of the hyperlink itself. There's nothing, we're just dealing with text in the header, and it doesn't have an ability right now to do any sort of hyperlinking itself, so it would just represent that text. Okay, we had a question about, oh, and this is another one that we've had quite a bit, so I actually prepared a slide. Let me go back here. The question was about can we bring Word into our projects via Ideate Sticky, and unfortunately the answer to that is no, we can't. We would love to be able to do that, but at present what we're doing is we're using the header to bring in the Excel data, and so we don't have the ability to bring in Word at the moment. We also can't do Excel charts or images. We can, however, do shaded cells, and that's kind of shown here. One of the examples that ships with the product is a column schedule where a number of the cells are shaded. And then there's also support for a lot of specialty symbols as shown here. Okay, well thank you very much. I know that we've reached our half-hour initial time limit here. Let me just double check and see if there's any other questions. And I think that's it. All right, well thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it. And again, I would encourage you all to take a look at our trial. You can find that at ideatesoftware.com/ideate sticky. Thanks and have a good day.